Good evening, morning. I don't know whenever you're catching this pod. I hope you're well. I hope your 2024 went well for you. It's the Love Again podcast with me, Patrick Dion Zell. I'm glad to be here. I know I have not done an episode in a very, very long time. Um, I don't have an excuse as much as my reasons have been life and then this master's program. They want all of your attention. And then, of course, church. And so just a lot of things going on. But thank you for reaching out to me, asking me about, what's up with the pod and when you're going to come back. I'm excited closing out this year to talk to a brand new friend that I made. I have a lot of Jamaicans in my life now that I love. They bring so much excitement and fun and intelligence, humor, and my life is just cluttered with all of these beautiful Jamaican people who bring their culture and they teach me about myself and about them. And so um, the Reverend Doctor Camille, I know a little, we speaking it, right?
Wait,
We
the
speaking it.
struggle,
Uh,
Patrick, the struggle.
Camille Heron is here with me for the first time, and I'm so excited to talk to her during the holiday season, particularly, and I think it's going to be fun. So, for the first time to the pod, hopefully it won't be the last time. Uh, Welcome, Camille. How are you?
I'm good. Thanks for having me. Super excited to be on um, for this conversation, but even more just excited that you are back with Love Again because I was an avid
Uh,
follower of the pod. And so,
Thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you, thank you,
and
thank
just
you.
so that everyone knows, the Jamaicans in your life make your life better.
They do.
That's what I'm
They do. They come with recipes and
Listen,
and
all the sauce,
all of it, and
all
it's
of
been a
it.
joy. You need you some Jamaican friends in your life. I'm telling you,
Absolutely. That's a public service announcement. Get some
absolutely,
Jamaican friends.
absolutely. I have it, so I feel more myself by having these friends in my life, and so thank you for being that. You're here on the Love Again podcast. I know we
Mhm.
talked offline. You thought you were interviewing me, but that's not usually how this goes.
But can we tell? Can I explain why? So
Sure.
that everybody knows. So when you
Hmm.
did the last season, which you still didn't actually finish,
Hmm.
I one day popped up and reached out to you and I said, "Hey, I think it would be great for you to close out the season with someone interviewing you."
Hmm. 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 Hmm.
Right.
Right.
And then
Um.
the season didn't end. So I just
Right.
assumed that when you're coming back that, that would be where we're starting. But it's okay. We'll work our way.
So next episode between me and you,
Okay.
we'll do that. That's
Mhm.
fine. That sounds like fun.
I think it will be.
That sounds like fun.
It might be your
Um.
most watched episode because I think the people will be interested in that side of the conversation.
Probably. Probably. That's fair. That's fair. But we're talking about you today,
Okay.
so.
No problem.
I want to start here. I think it's where we always start. That if you had to tell your origin story, um, who are some of the most important people and characters that would be a part of that, and why?
So I think the time of this conversation actually makes this question a bit more weighty for me
Hmm.
um, because over the holidays, I got to spend a lot of time by myself and interacting with some items that I didn't think I'd get a chance to have in my possession again. And having those items in my possession brought a whole flood of memories and um, a very tangible sense of void in some regards in my life. And so,
Hmm.
coming out of that, I would say some of the key persons are the three grandparents I grew up with. So,
Hmm.
both of my grandmothers and my maternal grandfather,
Hmm.
my parents and my sister. Those are the key people to who I am. And the way in which my world was formed and the perspectives that I have in this world in a lot of ways. So, my father is one of eight on his mom's side.
Uh-huh.
On his father's side, we still haven't gotten a full count. We think probably about 10, 11, 12, who knows.
Thank
Um,
you, Jamaica.
Listen, get you some Jamaican friends. This we've already established this, right? So,
Know
uh,
how to have a good time. Like I don't know, I tell you. You
I
only live
mean,
once, so you might as well just.
and it really is on both sides in this regard because grandma had five kids that are all Websters, and then the last three are Herons and all kinds of stuff. And
God
so,
bless her. Yeah, no.
and
I,
she really, with an army of other relatives around her,
mhm,
raised her eight kids,
mhm,
um, seven boys, one girl. Girl is right smack in the middle. So
mm,
she had her mom and her one of her sisters who helped her with raising those children.
mhm.
Um, and then my mom, her parents, she's an only child, and her parents, her mom was a evangelist, which is why when you text me as evangelist, I said wrong
Right.
person. Literally, my grandma was an evangelist
Yeah.
who in the 40s was going around preaching all over the island and started a couple of churches in our denomination. And my grandfather was a musician
Mhm,
who, when my grandma retired from pastoring, he became the pastor of the church
mhm,
there. And so they were the key people. I'm one of two children.
mhm,
I'm
mhm,
the older of the two. My
mhm,
sister and I grew up as each other's best friends, essentially. We're
mhm,
still very close. She
mhm,
got away because she's light complexioned. And so we couldn't do a lot of fighting. She could hit me. I couldn't hit her because it showed on her.
mhm,
Sure, you understand. And
mhm,
so we were just the chummiest of friends, and we still are fairly cool. Um, but we're so different, and the ways
mhm,
in which we're different really helped me to have a better appreciation for people and the differences, and meeting people where they are and understanding how love does not require much qualification if you choose for it to be so.
mhm,
In terms of learning early in life that people don't need to work for me to choose to love them, you just choose to love. Um,
mhm.
So yeah, that's really it. The island formed me. I moved here to the states when I was 14, and that's the origin.
So thank you for that. That's awesome. Um, when I think of Jamaica, I do think of our culture. Um,
Mhm,
and I was born in the States, and yet I feel a connection to that space,
mhm,
the Caribbean and all of Black culture that was there. And yet there's not a way that I can think about it that on some level I think about colonial rule
right.
and its effects on the region and it affects on the people, the indigenous people who were there, and how it took the form of the religion, um, and how that was shaped. When you
Mhm,
think about it, and if you think about it within that framework, what are
mhm.
some of the things that are interesting to you about its effects, its lingering effects? And then I am assuming your grandmother in the 40s and 50s was very, you can tell me if I'm wrong, very conservative and very um, very much influenced
Mhm.
by what was given to them and told this was the Jesus that they needed to worship. And your commitment to gave a commitment, a burden to those people to spread that news.
Mhm.
And it affects our worship, it affects how we rear children, it affects how we create community, all those different kind of things. So when you think about it, what do you see as some of the lingering effects or some of the reverberations that you may still have in your own life?
Yeah. One of the easiest way to capture it is I remember being in an event and the whole issue of it was an event for Black pastors here in South Florida, And in that conversation, somehow, I don't remember exactly how, but somehow the topic came up about diversity within the Black community, right? And so we know that we're not a monolith. And what a lot of people tend to not realize is how that plays out where churches are concerned. And so, for me personally, there's a distinction between the Black church and then the Black American church, and then a church that is Black led, that is not necessarily Black American, right? Predominantly Caribbean or any other mix,
Mhm.
Africans, whatever the case may be. And one of the things that I said in that session was people don't understand that a reason why a lot of immigrants will come to this country, Black immigrants will come to this country and choose not to be a part of a Black church in the sense of Kojic, Missionary Baptist, AME, churches along those ilks, is really because of colonialism. It's because our experience of the Western Christianity was introduced by white people in
Mhm.
our islands, and in in that way, a lot of our predominant denominations are all agents of colonialism. And so, the national church in Jamaica and in a lot of Caribbean islands still is the Anglican Church, the Church of England. Um, and then from that, Baptist and Methodist, eventually Pentecostal, which is interesting because you and I know that Pentecostalism here in America is accredited to a Black person, but somehow it, over the years, has seemed as if it was white led. It
Mhm.
shouldn't be. Um, and that plays out in the style of worship, in the music, in the theology, in some degree, to some degree. Um, and when you get here, you have to struggle to learn the history of the people here so that you can appreciate and find your place within that broader Black community within the church. So that's been an interesting journey. For
Mhm.
my grandmother, um, I think she was a little bit different because as a younger woman, the parts of her story that I know, as a younger woman, she was so much more about, yes, going out and preaching. And she was a part of the camp of this one man um, that really did well in finding young people and sending them out, a Black man. But also, she was a very enterprising woman,
Mhm.
very much a self starter, very motivated, had her own entrepreneurial endeavors that she was doing. So I, and that's one of the areas of void that I think I have now, being a single female pastor and not having her here, that I'm in this part of my journey, because when she started out, she wasn't with my grandfather. She met my grandfather and they got married when I think she was about in her 30s, if I'm
Mhm.
doing that right, based on when my mom was born. And so she was not filling the role of expectation of a woman in terms
Mhm.
of you're supposed to get married early, start a family, all of those things. I'm learning and coming to appreciate that much more now. Um, that marriage and the children happened later for my grandmother. She was very much about her business. I mean, everything from getting a church built and building a community. Years later, they still call the church by her name, even though her name is not on the church. And
Mhm.
so that definitely helped me in that I can recognize where there are colonial effects and their implications on a lot of how I see church,
Mhm.
but I'm not tied to it as much. Um,
Sure.
my dad, even though he's a pastor in our movement, he started out in the Anglican movement. And so that was a lot more progressive than the Pentecostal movement.
Mhm.
So I grew up with that kind of a balance, thankfully. Um,
Yeah.
yeah.
So there's a myriad of things that I want to hang my hat on, and I want to start here because a lot of times those of us who grew up in church, and I want to talk about more about your church upbringing. Um, I'm interested in where our definitions of love come from.
Mm,
Um, Not so much just the for God so loved the world, because
right,
I think we heard that, but then they never really explained to us these concepts in it. Like,
right,
what?
right.
What is God? What is love? What
But,
is the world? Like, what is
mm-hmm.
these things?
And to me, whosoever, all of those things.
Yeah, it's not an indictment against them. I think they did the best they could with the tools that they had and the understanding that they had, and we didn't ask, because as children in my space, you were basically seen and not heard, so you weren't supposed
Yeah,
to ask questions, and
correct.
so sometimes for me, I didn't get any like ideas about love till I was like maybe in my teens, maybe, and started listening to Luther sing about love and different people talk about love, where I began to kind of piece together my own definition of what
Mm,
it was. Disney did not help at all because it fetishized
right.
and created fantasies and fairy tales about love that which I have just declared they are not true. That's my
Some
own.
of them, there are partial truths.
Okay. We'll keep our fingers crossed, but for the most part,
I'm
like,
holding out hope. I'm holding out hope here.
I'm interested in where does your definitions or where did you start defining love for yourself, and who helped you kind of put that together?
I would say that I'm still defining love
Hmm?
in some areas of my life. So, on a broader sense, certainly I grew up understanding love as being um, exemplified by how you serve others, just by virtue of growing up around so many people who were ministry minded.
Hmm.
Um, I grew up seeing love in a marriage sense as friendship and partnership. That's what I've experienced with my parents and with my mom's parents. Um, but as I'm in my 40s now, I am still coming to grips with the various sides of love because I understand well the part of love that you give. I'm now starting to learn for myself the side of love that you come to expect or that you receive.
Okay.
So
Um,
let me see if I can make that a little bit plainer. For
mhm,
so in my family, for instance, on my dad's side of the family, um, there are about 30 something of us that we count as cousins. 35 or so of us that we count as cousins.
mhm,
When my dad's mom died in 2015 and we needed to do that count for the funeral, we landed on that number because we just gave up trying to distinguish who's related by blood, by marriage, by adoption. It was just like if you've been around us enough and you call her grandma, then we're counting you in.
mhm, mhm,
And that did not create any kind of contention. There was no issues at all because that's really how we grew up. Um, my mom, being an only child, when she married into my dad's family, all of his siblings became her siblings, and there wasn't a stumbling over do you say in love or in law. It's just that's my brother.
mhm,
Um, but now that I'm older, I'm having to grapple with the fact that not everyone understands love that way. And
mhm,
so while I am okay and comfortable with freely giving of myself, I'm now needing to understand that I don't do well in teaching others that this is the way that I see love. And so this is the way that I expect to receive it if you're going to be in close proximity to me. Um, and that's been an interesting journey,
mhm,
truth be told, because, and especially now when people are being so much more informed by persons looking for likes and going viral
I
than they
hate it.
I with a passion. And so they're guided by that a lot more than by real life experiences that actually work.
Yeah.
And it's become something that I really struggle with in various areas, not just in terms of the possibility of a romantic love, but even in terms of friendships and what people expect out of friendships. So I'm still defining what love is for me.
Um, I'm going to assume something, and then you can correct me if I'm wrong in my assumption.
Mhm.
But I assume growing up in the space that you grew up in, it was patriarchal, at least shades. I mean, it was.
Unfortunately, well,
Mhm,
let me not say unfortunately. Fortunately for me, I
mhm,
realized 2019, I was working on a project and I realized that I was actually blessed to not have that experience in my immediate family.
mhm,
Because again, my dad's side of the family, it's a single mom who was raising all these boys, and she's doing it with the help of a sister and her mother and her grand aunt, I think, or great aunt. So it's
mhm,
just this group of women raising all these men
mhm,
and teaching them not to grow up depending on having a wife to do things for them. So I grew up with, in our house, in our family, we laugh about certain things. If it's pork chops, potato salad, it's me. If it's beef liver or something special, it's my dad. If it's fried dumplings or hominy corn porridge, it's my mom. If it's curry chicken, it's my sister. Like there is no only this person cooks, only this person cleans. My dad is more of a neat freak than my mom is. Um, so I've always grown up in that regard. Again, my
mhm,
grandma was on my mom's side. My grandma was pastor in the church before my grandfather was. He was
mhm,
perfectly cool having a community shop and playing the trumpet and the banjo and starting a band and being a deacon in the church. So I didn't really grow up in those structures. And then in our denomination, women always preached and taught for as long as I've been alive. Um,
mhm,
they're still not bishops, but they serve in every other aspect of the church on the international and local levels. And so that kind of patriarchal expect or setup, I really learned that more so as I grew older and got into the work world.
mhm,
I grew up where back home your schools had male and female teachers. But we
mhm,
have that dynamic here where you can go all the way through until high school before you met a male teacher. That wasn't a
mhm,
reality for me. Um, we've had a woman head of state there, well, clearly before this country, because this country's never doing it. Um, so yeah, it's I'm not blind to it. I'm not blind to the fact that there definitely have been times that I've encountered it, but it did not shape me in my formative years.
Then let me ask you, um, and this is a new question that I'm formulating in my head. Growing up as a little girl, and then growing up as a young girl and going to the teens, I'm wondering what shaped your ideas about what the I don't like the term opposite sex because it just seems like there's conflict there. I think we are corresponding genders. I just find harmony in that term more than that. Um, but I guess essentially is, well, what were you gathering? How were you gathering your ideas about what a man was? Like what was other than you that you found yourself in relationship to your brothers or your father, grandfather, men in your community? Like, what was some of your ideas that you gathered about, well, this is what a man is in relation to who I am as a young woman?
So um, when uh, when I got to age 10 or 11, my mom moved here to the States prior to us doing so. I was about 10. So
mhm,
for 4 years, my dad was my primary caregiver, along with my mom's grandparents. And by that point, her mom had a leg amputated because of diabetes.
mhm,
And I got to experience for those 4 years my grandfather doing all of the cooking. Um, in our culture, it's still very normal to have a helper come in and clean,
mhm,
or help with laundry, depending on the kind of life you're living. And so someone would help come in to help clean, but all the cooking my granddad did. And my dad was the nurturing parent. Still to the stage, for me personally, he is more of the nurturing parent than my mom is.
mhm,
Not that she isn't nurturing, just he and I are closer. Um, so what I came to understand about who a man is someone that looks out for you and who cares for your needs, and cares for your needs not in the sense of material or transactional, but just cares for the thing that you need the most in that moment. And so for my grandmother, even with one leg, she tried to be super independent, but in whatever way he needed to care for her, my grandfather was there. um,
mhm,
my dad being the same. My mom made the sacrifice. She came over first and worked and got herself established, and he cared for all of our other needs in her
mhm,
absence. Um, and then my sister and I grew up, well, she probably more so than me, as tomboys. We were always surrounded by a bunch of guys. We played sports and was outside with the boys all the time. And so I came to understand boys and men as people who were friends, who respected you, who saw you as their equal. And if you were in need, they are there just as much as you would be there for them if they're in need. And that's kind of how I grew up seeing it. And I think to that regard, I was a bit sheltered. That
mhm,
certainly affected me now in my adult years, because I am always hurt, truth be told, when I come to realize that um, that's not the way that all men are, or how they understand that they should be.
mhm, mhm.
Yeah.
Um, I think, and I clearly we're going to have this running thread through here,
Mhm.
that in the times in which we live, um, in
Patrick,
this cesspool of
Lord,
ridiculousness and
the Dead Sea. Just, it is the Dead Sea. It's
it
an
is,
echo chamber of fecal matter.
to put it nicely, um, there it seems to be an assault on the idea of partnership in relationships.
Right.
Um, that we don't see um, our relationships as we help each other. It's either one is going to carry the other. Um, and it seems to me that the relationship you had with your grand the relationship you saw between your grandparents was one of a partnership.
Hmm.
Like if I fit in where you need me, and allowing your grandmother to be as independent as she can be, and when you can't, like I got you. Well, this is what we do. I bet all the money in my pocket versus all the money in your pocket, they wasn't having the conversations that
No,
these
at
like
all.
50-50 and all of this, and you gotta, I just what it's
It is
just
so ridiculous to me that we have gotten to a place as a society, especially as a people, right? Because these conversations are happening more in our community for whatever reason, that we've gotten to a place where we've minimized love to a currency.
absolutely a
It's
transaction. It
it
is
is,
nothing but a material transaction.
yeah. And it's a material transaction, truth be told, not because of what we are, because we're looking for it to meet a void in our lives, as much as that it is a transaction because we want it to fill the curated life that we want to present.
And not conscious enough to reject what is being projected to us and fed to us every day as if that's real life. Um, and
True.
it seems like we're trying to live out, trying to make a reality out of what is fantasy for someone else, and it is so can I say it, retarded our conversations and how we understand each other, and definitely stunted our emotional intelligence.
Right. Right.
And so it seems like your grandparents had the privilege of having a love that was outside of the echo chamber that we find ourselves fighting against now.
Absolutely.
Um, and it's interesting to me that you said that your father was the more nurturing of the
Hmm.
parents, or the connection, different levels of intimacy with your parents. It's just different.
Hmm.
I'm interested in what that felt like for you and how you experienced that kind of love from the primary man that was in your life.
Hmm.
In
Um,
the framework of, they say men can't feel, we can't connect, we can't communicate, we can't do all of these things, and clearly you had a different experience.
you know what though? There are because he is not some perfect hero kind of a person, right?
Hmm.
This morning, my parents are here, and I hope they never do see this. But if they were here this morning, and they're on their way back to where they live, they're coming from out of the country. While they were away on Christmas Day, my mom's phone goes blank, and my dad sends a text in the group chat to say, he has to report this device attached to this number is no longer alive. It was just super dramatic announcement in the family chat.
Hmm.
And so they knew that once they landed back in the States, she needed to go to the store to go see if she needs to get a new phone or if they can fix it somehow. And he just had the assumption she's going to go do that on her own. There's a car, she can drive, she's going to go take care of it. That's her phone. So he makes plans with one of his friends. They're going to go for breakfast. And she comes out, she's ready, and she's looking at him like, "Why aren't you getting ready?" And he's like, "What do you mean?" And she's like, "Because we're going to the store." And he's like, "I did not assume that I would be going to the store with you. It's your phone. You can do that. Why would you need me?" And so I'm playing the hilarious umpire between this back and forth between what that's going on with them. So I'm like, well, first of all, clearly both of you made assumptions, and assumptions made asses out of you and me. So there's that. So,
Hmm.
but also, I get her point. For a woman, unfortunately, we often need men around if we're going to go deal with something that may require some measure of negotiation because people assume women can't. And I was like, however, mom, on his end, clearly you should have said to him, "Hey, so are you going to go with me to the store in the morning?" Um, and in that, I'm able to joke with them now at this age, but just also in recognizing that both of them struggle after 40, 41, 42, 43 years of marriage. Am I counting that right? Yeah,
Hmm.
after 43 years of marriage, they still don't communicate perfectly. So even
Sure.
this notion um, that you'll ever get to a point of perfect communication, that just isn't it. You just get up every day and you know that this is your person and you've made this commitment. This is life, and
Hmm.
you're doing it. Um, and so whatever imperfect parts of them there is, it may still get on your nerve. You'll still go crazy about it. You'll still gripe about it, and then you'll keep it moving because love isn't attached to a person being perfect. That being said, I remember once I was probably 11, 10 or no, probably 12. My dad forgot my birthday. I was not home all day. I used to be a part of this thing in schools there called the Cadet Force, which is just like the JROTC here. And we had a inspection day, and So I was away from the night before in preparation for that, and all day. This was 90s. I don't have a cell phone. How would my father reach out to me throughout the day? You know, and I got
Mhm.
home and went into the night, did not at any point say happy birthday to me. I was so upset. But I'm also never have been a person who is comfortable with lashing out verbally
Mhm.
off of emotions. And so it was just like the next day I'm sulking and eventually I'm crying. And he's like, "What the issue?" And I'm like, "You forgot my birthday." He's like, "How did you forget my birthday?" That is probably the most disappointing thing I can ever remember in my entire life coming from my father.
Mhm.
Doesn't mean that there haven't been painful moments, but that was the only time. And in that moment, it was because for me, it's never been about gifts. We're not that kind of a family, but it was just that I was in forgetting it. Then what I received in that was you don't have that date so ingrained in your brain because it is so important to you because I am important to you.
Mhm.
And he quickly, once I shared that with him, quelched it. We're good. But that's really the only like truly disappointing thing that I've ever experienced. Every other fault and flaw or issue, it's just that's the person, and you meet the person where they are. Um, yeah. And so I think now it makes me seem more like a, I don't know what the right terminology would be, a pick me or a simp. One of those people. And
Neither. Neither.
because of the fact that I am fine with, I don't have to be on top of a man to say this is what you should be and this is who you should be and this is, no, you are who you are. Prayerfully, hopefully, that we continue to grow and progress and evolve and become better persons or better versions of ourselves or more aware versions of ourselves, truth be told, not so much better, just that you're more aware of your flaws and how to navigate life with that. Um, but yeah, I
I'm interested in what formed this personality that you have. That it seems like you're incredibly accepting. Most of us don't aren't reared or raised to be that way. I think it
mm,
when we come into this world, we're given food, shelter, toys, bottles, and things to quell our anxiety, hush our crying, to distract us. All these things parents give their kids, and it seems like it could carry over into our young adulthood, that we still think like the world is supposed to soothe us by giving things. And when you don't, when we run up against somebody who will tell you no, or who is
mm,
less than perfect, or who maybe as not as considerate as your father was, it's like, well, we are quick sometimes to dismiss people, discard people, because when they're not gratifying us and giving us and telling us all the things that we need, it's like we're just, I have no use or utility for you. To be the kind of person to be like, you're not perfect. Um, and I can accept um, that you're flawed in consideration of my own flaws, right? And that it doesn't mean that I am going to accept harm from you,
right.
but it does mean that you don't have to be perfect in order to be worthy of my love
Mm-hmm.
or friendship. It may not be that deep. It could be just friendship or my consideration of my time. That is unique. And I'm wondering, how was that formed in you?
I it I'm okay. So the first I got to sit with the fact that that's unique. I'm preparing someone for baptism tomorrow night. We had a session on Saturday, and in that session, we're going through parts of First John. It's a workbook we're using, and it's asking you to fill out the blanks. I'm a believer of Jesus if I, and one of the blanks was if I love my brother and sister. forgot which one of the passages in particular it referred to. And I said to the young lady that that one of all of the things is actually the easiest one. And she looked at me weird. I'm like, it actually is the easiest because if we are always conscious of the fact that we are flawed, then that should always shape how we see and how we love others. And loving a person does not mean that you have to be chummy or that you have to accept abuse or disregard or disrespect. It's just simply um, a choice that wherever you are in need, if I am able to, I will meet that need. Beyond that, and the need doesn't have to be material, right? And so if you're simply in need of comfort or encouragement, then I can put all things aside and be that. Um, I am not perfect at it. I certainly definitely have all kinds of judgments in my head, constant conversations going on in my head. But what people will get from me won't be what I'm processing on the inside, because internally I still have to process through parts of a person that I don't understand or that disappoint or hurt. But ultimately, and I think it's really guided by, there's a song by Babby Mason that I learned as a kid. This is one of the beauties of growing up in a colonialized society like Jamaica. Our radio plays everything, all the genres. And so there's a song by Babby Mason that says, "Show me how to love in the true meaning of the word. Teach me to sacrifice, expecting nothing in return. I want to give my life away, becoming more like you each and every day. My words are not enough. Show me how to love." Has always been one of my favorite songs.
Mhm.
That's one of my guiding principles. Um,
Mhm.
one of my other guiding principles has always been Philippians 2. So if I ever do get to be the kind of student that you are and do my actual writing, then Philippians 2, 3, and 4 is the passage that's pushing me, or has led me to the research that I want to do on kindness.
Mhm.
Because it's this whole idea of Jesus forsaking his role as God and coming down and living a life as man and then dying a death as criminal because of love. Um, and I'm not an idealist about it. I get that there it doesn't necessarily work that way for us as humans, um, but also we're human, and I can't have a expectation of a human that is beyond feasibility without under, without understanding that that's a seed that I'm sowing that other people will now expect of me. And I don't ever want anyone to have that expectation of me. I am a hot mess,
Mhm.
literally a hot mess. So there are so many parts of me that I don't want people to know or see. So I meet people where they are for that very reason. I think another part of it that I'm coming to learn, I did not want to be a pastor. Up until 4 years ago, I still said no. Now that I'm in it for 3 years, I'm realizing that a part of God preparing me to be a pastor is Him forming my heart in that way, so that whether I come from the same background as you or not, whether I can understand your story or not, I can still see you as the human that you are, in need of love, in need of presence, in need of reassurance. That when you hit out and you hurt and you divide, it's because there are parts of you that you have not yet healed or addressed. And based on where I am, I can choose whether or not I can meet you there. But if I can't, then I can love you enough to pray from a distance and point others who can possibly help you, or pray you out so that you go and find the place or the persons that can meet you in that place, right? But yeah, it's
I
unfortunate that's unique.
mhm. I want to resist having a preacher conversation with you because when you start throwing out
I know scriptures, it does
scriptures and
that.
concepts or whatever, it's like, oof, man, you know, that's
I know.
so let me. I'm gonna let it pass. I could, but I wanna resist that temptation because I love your analysis of that Philippians piece and what you see in it. But we'll save that for off. We'll do that for
Okay.
us. We'll do that. Um, I'm interested in how we've talked about love and how the role of church, as I've listened to you, church played a role in helping you define that.
Mhm.
And that's in some ways loving our neighbor can be easier in some ways than finding a romantic partner and putting
Oh,
that in practice.
25%. Yes.
Between an intimate partner.
Yep.
And I'm wondering, as you know, what was your experience like as you started liking, boys and wanted to start dating and putting that love stuff or like stuff into praxis? What
Mhm.
was your experience like? Because for me, we were forbidden basically to date. It was
I was
like,
the way you said wanting to date. And I was like, I haven't even gotten to that stage of my life. What? I can count on my hand the amount of dates I've ever been on in my entire life.
okay, no, I get it. I get it. Uh, but
Um,
I would assume that the attempt did not always meet what the expectation was,
we still haven't. I'm still very single. Yeah,
and
no,
so you're still learning what
yeah.
that space is for you and how to put the idea of love and connection into praxis in that space. Like, so I'm wondering for you early on in your life as a young woman, what was that like and what that experience was like for you?
So it was forbidden for most of my life. um, I I still remember it. Gosh, if I tell the story now, it sounds so romantic. I still remember my first kiss being on a church field trip. A church.
Of course it was.
Gosh,
Of
my
course, that was the only place we met other people.
I got in so much trouble. This is the first time I'm talking about it publicly. Oh my gosh. But it was a trip.
All of our first, I mean, we were church kids. All of our first kisses were in church. What is? We ain't going nowhere else. Like,
Yeah, but this one was it was a church trip. So we did in the islands, we do a lot of church trips to the beach,
mhm,
which is in and of itself just a hilarious experience because there is that whole dress code talk and what's appropriate behavior, what's not appropriate behavior, all of those
mhm,
kinds of dynamics,
mhm,
right? This one in particular, we went to Duns River Falls. And I remember I had just climbed the falls and coming down this tunnel. And me and this guy stopped and we kissed on the way down in the tunnel. And we got on the bus at the end of the trip and we're heading back home. And my mother was steaming because the bus, there were more passengers than seats. And they had these little crates on the bus for extra people. And he sat on one of those crates on the way to the beach. On the
mhm,
way back home, he had a headache because water had gotten his ears, whatever the case was. And so I gave him my seat and I sat on the crate. Already, that makes my mom raise an eyebrow.
mhm,
My dad wasn't on the trip.
mhm,
And where I messed up was that I had the audacity to get tired and lean my head on his shoulder.
mm,
Patrick,
mm,
minute we got off the bus,
mm,
he went in. We got home, he was still going in. I went to sleep. I woke up in the middle of the night to use the bathroom. She was still going in to my father.
mhm,
She
mhm,
just never. So, for all of my teen or preteen and teen years, that was just something that was forbidden. Um,
mhm,
but I definitely did have my little boyfriends back then. Coming into adulthood, it's so interesting in a lot of our church culture because you're told all these don'ts, and then suddenly
Yeah.
the light switches, and they're like, "Well, what are you waiting on?" And you're like, "I'm sorry, you I didn't."
Permission and what is this?
Right,
What am I
permission and
supposed
education, right? Permission
what?
and education, because like, I'm sorry, what we're supposed to. And it's more interesting for me because my parents got married in 1981, and in their church environment they didn't go out on dates. You saw each other, you liked each other, you
Yeah.
spoke to your they call them care group leaders now. They'll nowadays, I guess we'll call them like your small group leader or whatever. You spoke to your
Hmm.
care group leader,
Hmm.
which for my father, unfortunately, that was my mom's mom, who was the pastor of the church. Talk about
Hmm.
intimidating.
Hmm.
And very intimidating for him as well, because his family was not, they weren't Pentecostal. Pentecostals didn't consider Anglicans as being Christians, just like a lot of Christians don't consider Catholics Christians, right? And
And Catholics don't consider us Christians.
right, I
Mhm.
mean the whole right.
Right. So.
And then on top of that, he's from a single parent family, and all of that kind of stuff. So even just that was courageous of him to go to my grandma and express his interest in my mom. Um,
Mhm.
I've never heard a story of them going on a date pre-marriage. It just, you liked each other, you picked a date, you got married, kind of a thing. Um, I should ask them that question. So for me, I really didn't have the family structure that encouraged that or even taught
Mhm.
me anything about that. And that
Mhm.
has certainly crippled me in a lot of ways in terms of how to navigate that space.
Mhm.
Because my expectation, based on how I've been raised, is if I've been observing you and I've come to see and know, um, or what I think I see and know about your values and your behaviors and such, then from that is getting to know how are we compatible in terms of how do we see the world, how do we want to live, blah, blah, blah. And then you move towards marriage. So I've been a serial one person or one, well, gosh, let me figure out how to say this in a non-Jamaican way. Because in a Jamaican way, I'd say I'm a serial one burner person, but one burner won't make sense to you. No, it does. One burner for us is on your stove, that one burner that you use the most.
Mhm.
Right. So that's kind of how I've always seen relationships with guys, is like whether we've officially been titled boyfriend or girlfriend, which I've never really been a fan of the title girlfriend, that you're the one person that I'm focused on, that I love, that we're getting to know each other. And in my mind, we're working towards a forever kind of a situation.
Mhm.
So I keep failing. I've told myself now that maybe I should learn about dating and having, just going on dates and meeting people. And I don't know that I'd be successful at that. Um, so it's been a series of disappointments, but
Yeah. Mhm.
thankfully, with the exception of a couple of them, the disappointments have not been devastating because of what I knew of my parents and grandparents' relationship. They've all also always been friends, and so they continue
Mhm.
to be friends. So like I've given um I'll just say I have still very good relationships with almost every person that I've dealt with in that space.
Yeah. You brought up the word. You say you keep failing. Um, and I want to push back a little bit.
Okay.
Um, because I think in this framework for our conversation, it's more of, well, what is the end goal,
Mm,
right? Is the end goal is happily forever after,
mm,
um, knowing intellectually that there is no forever,
right.
and happiness comes and goes.
Right.
So what are we like? So what are we? What is the goal of that? And if that is the goal, then
Mm,
it is a failure, right? But if we can say that perhaps you meet someone, you date, you have some intentionality in your own head about, oh, well, this could be this could be that,
Right.
and it falls short of that. I don't necessarily see that as a failure, only because, and it's taken me years to come to this theory for myself. But I can look over my shoulder and say that each relationship that did not end the way I wanted it to end, it added something to me.
Yeah.
It made me conscious of things in me and made me more intimate with myself.
Mhm.
It taught me something to experience, a moment or a relationship with someone who was foreign to me, and without them I would not peer into humanity the way I do. And yes, sometimes it has been devastating for me. And but once, that heals and I become sober, it's like, well, it didn't end the way I wanted it to, but I got something from it. Like they gave me a gift. Now the gift isn't what perhaps I wanted from them, but like I still was left with something that added value to me. And I think that our life is made up of a lot of different loves, right? So if let's just say that you find the love of your life, and that could easily happen for you,
Mhm.
that person you meet is actually meeting the person who was developed over all the love and the quote unquote failings and all of the misunderstandings and all of those things. And they are getting the best version of you that could not be a reality had you not experienced the stumbles, the starts and stops, and the miscommunications. We learn how to communicate better by being horrible at communicating.
True. I think.
So it taught me things that I didn't ask it to teach me or did not want it to teach me, and yet it enhances us in some ways. And so I think for me, that's how I can make peace with relationships that did not end the way I envisioned them to end.
And I appreciate that, and in a lot of ways I absolutely relate and agree to it. um for me, when I say failures, it's more so on my parts, so
Mhm,
not so much the sum of, each relationship or interaction, but in my parts, recognizing that I've had failings in it, because and I think it's because of the fact that I don't understand dating culture well.
mhm,
Then I end up going into a lot of things. Again, most of them start from friendships. I go into them giving way too much of myself.
mhm,
And that's a lesson that I still struggle to learn,
mhm,
truth be told, because I am, again, for me, by the time we've gotten to a point where we're saying I love you, it's because I have actually already counted up all the costs in my head, and I have don't fully know you, but I've come to know enough of you that I've made that choice, and I can recognize that I'm at that point where I do genuinely love you and love all of you, including the parts still yet to be learned. And so for me, the failure is that I'm still struggling to learn that lesson in terms of moving forward with others.
mhm,
What does that process look like? But yeah, I appreciate the lessons that I've learned, including the ones that were painful ones. I fully appreciate them. I fully appreciate um, one person who I thought for sure would be something far more serious, and my family did at one point. I appreciate them one day looking at me and saying, you really sometimes come across like one of the boys. Understood. Okay. Got it. Not that it's something that I need to now internalize to change who I am, but I'm just more conscious of the ways in which I can be received by others. And so I take all the lessons, and I'm grateful for them, but I still recognize that I also still have feelings in the process.
Sure. I don't think there's a rational way to talk about love and not talk about grief and loss. Um, and that was something I learned way too late in my life.
Mm-hmm.
Um, I don't know, and it's reinforced. Of course, our parents. I talk to my mother now about these things. It was like, you didn't explain to me what a funeral was. It's like going to all of these funerals as a kid, and clearly nobody's having a good time. So why are we doing this? Like, why are we? We keep doing this? Like what? And they never explain like what death was. They never
Mm-hmm.
explained like what grief was. They never explained any traditions around. Well, this is why we do it. And our church services, Pentecostals, it could be confusing because you go to a funeral, it feels sad, but then there it looks like they're having a good time because they get to have church.
Oh
And they're
yeah.
like, I don't know how. What are you happy? Are you like
Right.
I don't. I could
Right.
not process what was happening. It was very very confusing and
Mm-hmm.
I think I've learned way too late about loss and about death and about grief,
Mm-hmm.
and that those things will be a companion. It is a companion to our humanity,
Yeah.
and not knowing how to understand, conceptualize, and practice grief in a healthy way
Yeah.
can hold up your life for years. And I've been there. I've grieved losses for 4 or 5 years and just could not get over it. I'm
Mm.
wondering, for you, how was that experience of understanding what grief of and what it is to grieve, and um, how did you navigate that very early on in your life, and how do you navigate it now?
Um, so I would say early on in life, I we moved quite a bit in my early years, whether it be because of the different churches my dad was appointed to, or his back when he was bivocational, his 9 to 5 job, transferring him. And so I I think what that subconsciously taught me at a young age is to love well while you're there, and then to move on when it's over.
Mm,
Um, to not be so deeply attached to the point that you can't move on and start again. As I've gotten older, for me now, I've learned to hold space for loss. Um, so when we started earlier about the origin story, last week Monday, I received my grandfather's banjo, the last banjo he had before he died, and he played multiple instruments, but the banjo in particular was my favorite because when he was moving to the States, I begged him please to bring it with him.
mm,
It was just, it was something that is very near and dear to folklore music back home. So I really wanted him to. And when he died, someone asked my mom for it and she gave it, none of them knowing that it would mean that much to me. And so when I got it on Monday, I sat down and I held it in my hands. I started looking up YouTube videos to learn how to play because I don't know how. And I bawled. I cried all Monday, all Tuesday. I was not in a place to be around people on Christmas because there was that sense of coming to reckon with all of the things that I did not get to learn from my
mm,
grandparents, and also suddenly feeling a sadness that I did not get to experience when he passed. 'Cause when he passed, I cried. I absolutely cried. I was the person that was with him the most. My mom was convinced that he actually had taken his last breath when she called me in the room and asked me to say his name because the last 2 weeks of his life, I'm the one person he would respond to. But for some reason, because his service was held at our church, then like at the funeral, I jumped back into church mode. I'm in the AV booth. I'm singing with the worship team. All of those things, and I intentionally did not sit with my mom or relatives. I
Mhm.
worked the service essentially.
Mhm.
So I'm coming to learn now to hold more space for loss. And that's been a journey really over the last 3 years, because in the last 3 years, my life has transitioned in a in multiple ways, and each of those ways have come with their own sense of grief from what was normal to me, grief from what I considered home, reframing what that looks like, grief from realizing that I am not now living a life that I imagined that I would live. And
Mhm.
I think I'm going to get to a place where I'm fully embracing and in love with what I currently doing. But even that came with grief because, and I don't think that I've ever heard anyone speak of it. And I'm afraid of even opening up that discourse publicly. But even that whole sense of answering a call for me is a process of grief because in some regards, it feels like the loss of choice. Um, and it isn't, because I could easily have just said no and not taken on the role. But in some ways, some parts of that that I grieve and how
Mhm.
that changes life. And yeah, it's for me, it's getting to a point of being okay with acknowledging the loss and in acknowledging the loss, being fine with that affecting me deeply and not wanting to rush beyond it, not wanting to fill that space with something else or with others or with noise, um, and to use it as an opportunity to reflect on the deep impact of that thing that you've lost.
Mhm.
It's kind of where I am.
Um, so I want to talk about ministry for a minute because it's permeated this conversation, and I love the idea that the answer to the call is a type. It is accompanied by grief,
Yeah.
because there's a sacrifice to be made in order to do it. Like it does not come out of what we don't have. It asks for what is precious to us. And so I wanna talk about your calling to ministry and what that looks like and what that feels like and what that process was for you. Um, so I know you say you started pastoring or accepted the pastorate about 4 years ago now,
Three.
3 years ago now. In the middle of your life, you decided to go
Patrick.
into
Patrick.
the pastorate.
Patrick.
No, look, transitions in life, especially in midlife, I think are more distinct in a healthy way because we are transitioning on purpose into
Yeah.
how we understand ourselves, and this is the space that best contextualizes my gifts and what I perceive my callings are. And so I'm not mad. I'm curious though. Like,
Why?
yeah, and how you begin to understand yourself, to evolve into that, and to rationally, much as you can, understand the sacrifice and what it is asking of you as a single woman. Um, I think it's courageous, incredibly courageous, to do that in the middle of your life with perhaps some maybe open relational issues that you may want resolved. And so you're doing it as a single
Mhm.
black woman. And so much respect your decision, and how brave and courageous that is. And I'm also curious as to why. Okay. God bless you.
You know what? It would not have. I think I can comfortably say I don't think I would ever be at this point if I wasn't in the church that I was in.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so, quick background: we're in a denomination, and in that denomination, pastors are appointed to their churches, right? And so, certainly, the church has some input, but ultimately the decision is made by your national or state bishop, depending on your country. And
Mm-hmm.
so my dad was the last pastor at this church, and he pastored it for 18 years. It's the longest um, time that he served in any one church because previously we would do reappointments every 4 years or every 2 years, every 4 years. And so he's never done 18 years straight. And he got to a point right around year 15 or 16 where he felt like his time was up for various reasons.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so at that point, he started to have conversations. And he's the kind of person, he's a very laid back person, he's a jokester. Um, he, he clowns, and sometimes you have to like, wait, are you being serious? Are you for real? And so he started talking to several people, several leaders and ministers around our church about whether or not they would want to consider pastoring. Persons who he absolutely identified a lot of great pastoral qualities in, and I agree with him. Any of those people could have. Um, and he did that so that whenever he sat with our state bishop, that he could actually say, I'm moving on. Here are some names that I think you should consider. You don't have to, but here are the ones that I think you should consider. And when he finally got to that point in 2021, at the beginning of the year, he said to me, "Hey, I really am going to have that conversation this year. I think this year is the end for me here, and I don't know what my next is going to be, but I know this is the end for me here. Can I say your name?" I said, "No, you can't. Absolutely not. No, 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 no." But it was the conversation was the beginning of January of 2021, and so what do a lot of churches do at that time? You do that whole 21-day fast, right? And I'm like, I guess I should act like an actual Christian and say, well, let me pray and fast about it. And I said that, but like, as with most people, don't actually plan to, right? That's just a delay to my no. Um, but around week 2 of that 21-day period, I was working from home at the time because of the pandemic, and I was working from home, and I felt really guilty about the fact that I hadn't actually prayed about it. And so I was in my room and I said, God, this can't be it. Because I'm a mess. And I'm so serious about that. I'm like, you know me. They don't know me. You know me. You know me. If this is really what you want me to do, if it's something that you actually think I can do, if something you think you've actually placed in me, then I need you to show it to me. And I've never really been the kind of person that will walk around and say, God said, or showed me this, or whatever. But in that moment, I felt a rush of imagery and a rush of downloads and ideas specific to our local church. And at the end of while it was happening, it was such a rush that I actually grabbed pen and paper and started writing. And at the end of it, I looked at the paper of all the things that I wrote down, and I was like, oh wow, this is actually something I could do. And so I sat with it for the next week and a half, and then at the end of it, I said, fine, you could say my name. Um, but when I said that, I did not think it would actually that meant I would be the one that was going to be selected. And so fast forward to 6 months after that, our state bishop came down, met with the leadership of our church, ministers, deacons, and all of that. And um, at the end of the meeting, he asked if they had suggestions. And from them came my name as well as our associate pastor's name. And our associate pastor, um, she's a bit older than I am, a few years younger than my parents. And she said at this stage of her life, no, she thinks she is called and prepared to be associate to whoever is the pastor, but she shouldn't be the lead. And And then they asked me to leave the room. And then when I was brought back into the room, they said it was a unanimous thing. Really, it was just a discussion in terms of what would me pastoring look like in terms of them all rallying around me. Um, and then a few months afterwards, the announcements went out for all of the new appointments, and my name was called. And even then, because of the kind of church that we are in our particular location, we're really close. We're very laid back. You have to have thick skin because we clown a lot. So not thick skin because of drama, but just that we clown a lot.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and when I heard people coming up to me and just like affirming it, it really was a lot of that for the first 2 years. It's that I was showing up because of the affirmation of others, because of others saying that they see this in me, because others saying that um, that this is the right choice, that I'm at the right time, and it's it really wasn't until the end of year two that I finally now started to come into a sense of fully accepting it.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I'm grateful because they've been such grace filled people in that first 2 years, really the first 3 years, they tempered their expectation because I think they're very aware of the fact that I genuinely didn't spend my life preparing for this or expecting this. What helped me is I made the stupid decision to do seminary at the end, and at the
Just keep,
time,
just keep, just keep.
you know, and when
Go.
I but the thing is, like, when I was doing seminary, it was the kind of thing where it was like it was a whole crew of us from our church that we were all doing it. And my dad is big on education, and so we're all doing the classes together and cohorts together. My mom and I graduated together. She had a higher GPA than I did at graduation. I barely made it to cum laude, and she was like, um, but through that journey, as well as the place that I was working prior to stepping into this role, it was at a Christian foster care agency.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and so being around all of these people, and I don't know, just it became more real.
Mm-hmm.
And even living a life dedicated to service to people, and pointing them to the most perfect representation of love was it became more real, and I adjusted to it. And I think now going into the beginning of year four is when I'm finally at a place where I'm like, okay, so now that I'm in this role, now here comes the other parts of my leadership in terms of setting vision and identifying talents and abilities in people and pulling them into place, and um, leading us to be the church that I think God wants us to be in our community. But yeah, until then, it really was just a journey of a lot of struggles with acceptance. And um, I am often reminded of this one verse, and I wish I could remember what translation reads it this way, where Samuel goes to Saul, right when God tells Samuel, like, okay, we're moving on from Saul, and he says to Saul, I wish I remember what translation, that like God chose you as king, but you saw yourself as a dog, and that's First Samuel 15:17, and it struck me personally because it is this whole sense of one, acceptance, and how our lack of acceptance affects the way we show up in spaces. Right? It affects whether we show up fully as ourselves, and but also the fact that insecurities and self-esteem plays a lot in how we lead and how we operate in community. Because I think that was his greatest issue. His disobedience only was because he wasn't as confident. Um, and so I'm constantly pushing myself and challenging myself where that's concerned, and I'm not always successful at it. But Grace covers where I fall short, I guess, or something like that, whatever they say. But I'm at a place now, and I think it is because of the church that I'm in, that I'm around people that I trust with me, and I trust with my voice, and I trust them with my heart, to a great degree. There's always parts of it that you reserve, but I trust them with it, and so I get to show up and to just be Camille, and we just get to do church and life together. Yes, Patrick.
I want to resist. I
No, go,
no,
Patrick.
no, 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 no. I when I have these conversations, I don't know. I've talked to maybe one or two pastors,
Mhm.
and I've always resisted having conversations about the pastorate. And I
Mhm.
understand that church frames us because most of the people I talk to at least have some church background.
Mhm.
But since we're here and you're talking about
It's okay. Let's go.
the pastorate, we could just
Let's go. Let's go.
talk about the pastorate. As I observed, and our church will be 20 years next year.
Oh, yeah.
It is
Was it danger or was it shake it fast? Oh, sorry.
ask me that again.
No, it's okay. I'm a
I,
derailer.
I didn't hear you.
That's fine. That's fine. Because the minute you say you're hitting 20 years, I don't know why. Of all things that would come to my mind was it danger or was it shake it fast? Watch yourself. I can't remember which.
It was shake it fast.
Okay, all right, keep going though.
Again, in my defense,
I
that's a,
know. I get
that's a
you.
great record. Like
It, you know, and
it
sometimes
goes
you
hard.
have to take it.
It was
Sometimes
totally an accident.
I
But
okay. I don't mean to derail you, but
no,
yeah.
no, no, it's fine. It's fine. Um, the pastorate is it's a very vulnerable environment um, because it takes partnership.
Mhm.
It's not something you do
Solo.
independently. You do in partnership with the community that you're in, um, which leaves you stationary, and everybody else is can be transitional, right? And so you
Mhm.
don't always know who you're working with, who you're working for, who
Right.
are you serving, how their needs change. Oh, in the midst of that, I change, my needs change.
Right.
How I'm thinking about these all things, they change, and nobody notices that. Nobody tends to that. You have to do that for yourself,
Yeah.
and so it's a very vulnerable environment. And I think one of Saul's issues was that he always felt like he was auditioning, and I get that. I understand that even with all the things that
Mhm.
Saul, we would think that Saul should be confident in. You're a foot taller than everybody else. You're handsome. Your family's handsome. You're a warrior. You have all of these. Your CV is full of all of these things, and yet in kingship in the monarchy, you're incredibly insecure and feel like I have to prove I'm
Well,
worthy to people all of the time. I
and remember
asked,
that's how he
since you brought
started.
that up,
No, no, but
how do you deal with
and but remember
or
too.
if you deal with it?
No, no, no. I absolutely do. And remember, that's also how he started, right? Because when it was time for him to be announced, where was he?
Right.
Tall man is hiding. Um, I'm constantly dealing with it, and my some of the things that I have to be very mindful of, and I'm not in any way at all mastering it yet. Um, I love assigning everybody else to preach but myself, but I understand that I have to do
Mhm.
a lot of the preaching. So that causes me to lose sleep. Doesn't matter how many days I give myself to prepare, I'm going to lose sleep that Saturday night. And a lot of it is I've got to shut me off so I can hear God and hear the scriptures.
Mhm.
And it's because there is that there is that constant tension for me. I don't consider myself a heavy preacher or even a great preacher. And especially in light of the expectations on a Pentecostal woman who preaches, I'm I don't necessarily do that. I'm really more of a teacher, I guess. So I am having to always battle the communication, the commu- battle how true am I to the scripture? Is my study enough? Is my hermeneutics in being done well? Is my presentation going to be at a place where the very educated and the uneducated equally get it, in the, or can hear it and find parts of it for themselves? So I overthink a lot on that. But outside of all of that, it's also constantly, do I look the part? Because I'm not showing up in a hat in a church suit with the jackets past the hip. It's what I feel like on a Saturday, on a Sunday morning. Do I look the part? Do I even pray and sound the part? Am I? Because I don't
Yeah.
remember all the cliche things to say. And so there's
Right.
always that constant battle. But then also beyond the Sunday morning part of the experience, it's also when I show up to certain community things. Because while, yes, my denomination have women who are pastors, there's not a lot of us here in South Florida. I think I'm still the youngest woman who's pastoring in our state. Um, and then when I show up in spaces that are not just my denomination, I'm in ecumenical spaces, then I'm even more of a rarity
Mhm.
because it's not just the Southern Baptist circles that I'm a rarity in, and I've been in those events and those circles, but even within Black churches, when you gather with Black church pastors, you get that look, and then you walk in and you're the single woman, and you've got to show up in a way that nobody thinks that you're in here trying to fish for a man, because that's not what you're doing. But that your voice can be taken seriously. And so always in so many ways dealing with that, and as well as learning acceptance and discernment when it comes on to friendships now, because we are left vulnerable so much that we have to be careful about who we're surrounding ourselves with. um, Part of it for me is that I'm really keen on having people close to me who are able to fully handle all of me.
Mhm.
So my best friend and my girlfriend circle, they are people who know and love Camille. Um, my church environment, I try my best to counter anything that would suggest that I am being put above or before anyone. And so if they're doing something with food, I have to get bullied by the church mothers because you're not going to find me. I don't want to be the first one served. I don't want to be none of that special stuff. You'll walk into the church some Sundays. I might be sitting on the front row. Some Sundays I might be in the AV booth. Some Sundays I might sing with the worship team. Um, I'm very intentional about just showing up as me and not filling the pastor role. And I think that's helped in terms of um, me feeling the acceptance within myself, because I am intentional in everybody else accepting who I am as just, I'm just Camille. You call me pastor in a formal setting, but everyone calls me Camille, including the kids. Um, but I'm still not mastering it completely, and so my therapist gets to hear a lot of that as
Right.
well. And
Right. Shout out to your therapist.
listen,
No, it was the best decision that I made
yeah,
was to have that component, wellness component, in my life.
yeah.
I know I would not have been able to navigate if I did not create that for myself. So,
And even that for me was such a hard journey. I had a therapist some years ago before being in this role, and we paused for a while and with the intention to restart. But then along the way of the pause. I found out that she celebrated Trump winning in 2016.
Mm, mm.
And then the church that she belongs to, women don't preach and they don't teach. And even though I wasn't pastoring in that time, I just knew that there are parts of me that you would not be able to relate to because before I was pastoring, I was always leading in some way or another. So I couldn't return there. I don't care how nice she was
Right.
because, yeah. So it really took me a very long time. And honestly, I just found someone within the last month. And it's because I got to a point where I said to God, I cannot go any further if I do not get help.
Well, I'm glad you had that conversation with the Lord, and I'm glad He he answered that for you because I don't understand how pastors pastor and don't have that for themselves.
It,
I
nah.
I don't see it, and I see I can point out a lot of dysfunction.
I was
Um,
going to say you see it, but it always comes with dysfunction,
right,
and all kinds of issues, right?
right.
Because
So,
it is about giving yourself the permission to be open and vulnerable and weak to someone
and process.
and to process.
Um,
Absolutely.
uh,
Um, Especially for those of us who are doing this as a single person,
yeah.
truth be told, because um, I get to see my parents, and I have other friends who I'm very close with who they're quite transparent with me about their relationships and their pastoring, and they get to enjoy the ones that let me couch it by saying the ones who are in marriages where it's a true partnership and they're actual friends,
Mhm.
right? Not the ones who put on the whole pastor and first lady or whatever. Um, there's such a benefit to having that person when you're in
And I
this.
think they take it for granted. I think they take it for granted that you have somebody that on a Saturday night can help soothe your central nervous system when you are over processing and your mind is spinning about everything you need to do and how good you need to be tomorrow. They take it for granted that somebody's there to steady you and to bring you some peace and ground you a little bit. Yeah, I totally,
And to pick you
totally,
up on Sundays when you feel like you fell short,
absolutely, absolutely.
or even that there is someone in your immediate space who you're their priority, and when you get out of the church parking lot, they now meet you and deal with you as you, not as your role, right? 'Cause
Yeah.
that's really important to have people in your life who, like some of my close friends, not even in jest do I want you to call me pastor. At
Mhm.
all times, call me Camille or any other nickname you have for me because
Right.
that's so important to me.
Because it reminds you that you're a person.
And I'm a person.
I'm more than the role that I play.
Absolutely. Yeah.
There are people who see me, um, and I think that's so important. Yeah, we could talk through that, but I'm gonna let you go. We going there's gonna be a part two, part three probably. There's yeah,
Because we definitely have to spin
yeah,
the
right,
table on you. Yes.
right.
Okay.
There's two things I want to do. Two things I want to do before you leave. Number one, I'm interested in how you are experiencing the holiday season um,
Mm.
as a pastor, as a single pastor. Um, it could get complicated um, to try to be happy that Jesus is the reason for the season, and yet you sense in Advent season a sense of loss
Mhm.
and some emptiness, and it's
Yeah.
counterintuitive to what you need to be and sometimes what you need to project and what you're experiencing um, in your private life. And so, how are you this holiday season?
This particular holiday season was a bit tough again because of how it started with dealing with that whole grief of my grandparents
Mhm.
in a way that I've never really experienced it before, but also because this was the first holiday season where I was alone, both by choice and by default,
Yeah.
on Christmas Day. Thanksgiving, I did it by myself by choice. I wanted to cook and do all the things and eat by myself. This Christmas was not so much that.
Mhm.
Um, but it was countered by a church mother calling me to come pick up the greens because I told her I never had collard greens, and so I had to go drive and get.
How swell? Okay.
Don't. it's a whole conversation
Okay.
from HBP. So
Okay. We'll talk. Yeah.
we'll talk about that.
Okay.
And then, um, but then also because of how our church is and because of the role I've played prior to being pastor, I don't get to be super, well, this year, I tried to be super slow and just be about myself for the holiday. And now tomorrow night is New Year's Eve. We do a New Year's Eve service, and I'm having to kick into gear and get things done that weren't done. Um, so I don't really get to fully experience it. I think I don't get to fully experience the holidays in ways others do because there's no one intentionally, there's no one in my life that, intentionally forces me to just holiday. And
Mhm.
it's not just about, well, this is also the time of year where we've got to do all the performances for church, all of the things. Um, but yeah,
Yeah.
it's that tension, right? Of it's unfortunately not the time of year where a lot of us get to be us and not be the pastor and put on the greatest performances.
It's a complicated space. It at least makes it interesting.
I'm
At the
telling you.
very least, yeah. At the very
Yeah,
least.
yeah, yeah, yeah,
So,
yeah.
last thing. So I
Yeah.
have some rapid fire questions that I give to all my
Yes.
guests before you leave. I'm going to test drive some new questions with you
Okay.
because I know you can handle it, and
Okay. All right.
why not? So,
Okay. Put the
uh,
glasses on for them too. Okay. Let
yeah,
me
I want to make sure I'm
straighten up. Prepare for these. Okay. All right. Okay.
um, and what I've decided to do was that I'll answer them with you.
Okay.
I'll answer them with you. Okay, so first question. Are you happy with your life right now?
No.
Okay. Um, am I happy with my life right now? No. Okay. Um, what has love taught you this year?
What love has taught me this year is that there is always room for disappointment. What about you?
Um, I think this year that love has taught me that love is patient.
Hmm.
It's patient. Um, where do you find joy?
I find joy in silliness.
Mhm.
I find joy in um, I don't know, in the simplicity of the simple things of life. And I find joy in others' smile, their smiles, and in their sense of being seen.
Okay. I find joy in peace.
Mm.
I find joy in laughter,
Okay.
and I find joy in music. Yeah, that's where I find it. What makes a good lover?
A good lover is attentive
Mhm.
and willing to sacrifice. What about for you?
I think a good lover is a good teacher.
Hmm.
Um, yeah, I think a good lover is a good teacher. There are other things, but right now that's uh, what's foremost in my mind. Um, what do you know about love now that
Hmm.
you didn't know before?
I should have been prepared for this one.
Mhm.
Um, You answer and then I'll come back. Mm, see, not as easy as you think. Huh.
Yeah, well, yeah, no. I think what I know now
Mhm.
is that the ego and pride
Oh, oh,
always works against
oh,
your love interest.
yes.
Right? It will rob you of what you say you want,
Mhm.
and hold you hostage. And so um,
So
that's what I know.
I think what I know now is that people often desire what they are not prepared for.
Yeah, yeah, that's good. That's good. Okay, this has been awesome. This has been like really worth the wait. Like this is this has been great. It's a great way to end the year, the last part of the year.
Mhm.
Thank you so much, my sister, for
It's my
coming
pleasure.
on. And I'm proud of you. I am awed by your courageousness and audacity to respond to God in the way that you responded, and to be faithful to that. Um, I I'm in awe, and so I am looking for great things, whatever, however that is. You define that for yourself. Your happiness and joy and fulfillment is
Mhm.
what matters to me, and so. Thank you for being you, and thank you for coming on the pod, and thank you for hanging out with me. I really really appreciate it. Thank you.
It was really my pleasure, even though, we
Yeah.
started out and I didn't know it would go this way, but no, it really was my pleasure. It was a great conversation, and also ditto. I mean, for the parts that I do know, you've taken on some really courageous journeys in the last couple of years, not just in terms of pastoring, but also just in terms of pursuing what you want to pursue and not being limited by what was, and going after what you want and what you think you should be doing. And so, good
Thank
job,
you.
sir.
Thank you. I'm trying.
Yay. And
Yeah,
thank you
thank
for snapping along the way.
yeah,
Appreciate
yeah, yeah. And so thank you everybody for hanging out with us and enjoying this
it.
conversation. If they wanted to get in touch with you or reach out to you, where can they find you across Al Gore's interweb?
Lord, until it becomes Elon's interweb.
Right.
I can be found at Cami Speaks everywhere. So Instagram, TikTok, Threads, Cami Speaks, Facebook. I think it's like Cami.Heron, or you can just go to my website, camispeaks.com.
Got websites. Y'all don't.
No, that's
Hey, no, I'm just saying, like,
that's legit
no,
simple WordPress
stunt
and
on all of us. Like, that's do what
it's
you do.
not. Ain't nothing on there. It's just
Mm,
I I used to blog.
mm,
That's it. Nothing,
okay.
nothing fancy.
I'll let your girl.
Whatever.
Google. Google your
Don't
girl.
Google me. You will find Camille Heron in Paris, Camille Heron in Germany, and the one in Canada. You'll find Camille Heron that used to be a cross country walker, runner, something. Everybody but me. You will find Jill Scott Heron before you find me. But it's
Well,
on
thank you again, Camille. I really, really appreciate it. I've thoroughly enjoyed this time, and look forward to have you back real soon. We're going to do this. Well, let me get through the next semester, and then we'll see.
completely understood. And by then, I'm going to vow to myself by the end of your next semester, I should have at least two chapters written.
Okay. All right. We're gonna
We'll,
be yeah,
we'll,
we'll be talking through it.
yep, we'll
Gotta
hold each
get
other
this
to that.
done. Gotta get this.
Yes,
Thank
sir.
you, everybody. Have a great holiday season. Have a safe New Year's, and we'll see you in 2025. It's gonna be a big year. I'm excited about it for you, for me, for us. And so, thank you for hanging out with us. Till next time. Love you all. Bye bye.